So we're now looking at Unit 4, which is decision making to improve operational performance. So we're looking at factory or production within a company. So this is split really into 3 different sections. The first section is about setting objectives, and at the same time, if we're setting objectives, we need some data which we can use to measure whether those objectives have been set. Then the second section is making improvements. So that includes efficiency and productivity, and it also includes quality. And then finally, we're looking at how we can make sure that the inventory is managed carefully, so there's not too much or not too little stock, and that supply chains are managed. So those are the 3 sections. So what does operations management do? They take the inputs, the individual inputs, and they add value through their transformation, through the manufacturing process, to produce finished goods. So it's this transformation process that the operations department are involved in. So where could you set objectives within this department? I'm going to let you read this fully, but as a summary, you'll realise that they can set quality targets for manufacturing and transformation process. They can set cost targets. They may set environmental targets or objectives. As we know, the whole process of operations is about adding value. That transformation is adding value. So your one objective could be to see how much value you can add to individual raw materials. It may be a speed process, particularly where things are made bespoke for individuals. You may promise things within a certain date. You may suggest that you'll have certain flexibility, but of course remember, if you become more flexible, the costs will rise. So then finally, in this very brief chapter, as you'll recognise from so many units before, when we set objectives, we need to consider what could influence those objectives. A major part of the influence is always going to be the internal setting. That may be the management, it may be the management or the ownership, it may be what resources they have, so other departments feeding in. It may be the type of product, so we looked at that in marketing. Depending on the product, we'll decide whether they are looking perhaps at quality or quantity, for example. And it will also be decided, or influenced rather, on other broader objectives that have been set at a higher level. And then of course there are the external influences on the objectives for the operational department. And as you can see here, it is absolutely vital and really of value that you learn and recognise this PEST C. We have PESTLE or PEST C. So external influences, it's so glaringly obvious at the moment that external influences are having a gigantic effect on particularly supply chain, for example. But of course, depending on if new legislation is made, political influences, the economy, where people's social values stand, what technology is available, and what the competition are doing. So to create operational objectives, what you need to do is you need to make some calculations. I'm not going to go over this leaflet, this booklet, but to remind you that you know already, but you should learn and be very familiar with these calculation. So we have unit cost, that's the cost for every individual unit. You have labour productivity, that means how much an individual is producing. And we've got the calculation here. So you have how many units divided by how many employees there are, or workers there are. We then also look at capacity, how many could we produce, and then capacity utilisation, how much of that capacity are we actually working at the moment? How high is our output compared to the maximum possible output? Things like airlines, this is vital because they work to very tight cost lines. So it's vital that airlines run at practically full capacity, and in the next few years this is going to become an issue that we will see playing out. And it's worth looking at the fact that capacity utilisation, you want high capacity utilisation, you want to be producing at very near to the maximum you can, but it's worth remembering that while you do that, there are problems that can be caused if you're not prepared for changes. So that's an introduction to these two chapters. So the next section really is looking at increasing or improving efficiency and productivity, and then quality. So again, you should read this fully. But in summary, when we look at efficiency, we're looking at reducing the unit costs. So how can we do this? Well, we can make sure that individuals are producing more, so increase labour productivity. Okay. But there are obviously problems with doing that. We need to look at the optimal mix of resources, and this list here is key. You will have, as a business, a combination of land, labour, capital, and enterprise. That is perhaps almost imagination, your own input of that. And a business will have to choose how to combine those things. Key phrases are recognising that some businesses are labour intensive or are currently being run as labour intensive. That means that they have a lot of humans doing the main production. On the other hand, it's possible to convert some businesses or some production to capital intensive. That means you use that means you use machinery and technology in far greater amounts. It's much more predictable in its use, but it's worth recognising these two separate terms that we use a lot. And here we have a list of the benefits and the problems of labour and capital intensive areas of work. Then we have to decide, we're looking at our optimal mix of resources, and there are factors that will affect how we decide to work. For example, if we are very flexible and work at the needs of the customer, we may have to be very labour intensive because we have to change what we produce quickly. On the other hand, if we are trying to produce a very, very high turnover, it may be of something very simple. It may be that we will make that more capital intensive and get more machinery in. Also, when the costs of labour go down, then it's more likely you will employ staff individually. When it goes up, you may look at getting machinery. An example of this, I would suggest, is fruit and vegetable picking in the UK. Currently there is seen as a flow of low-cost labour. But if labour rules adapted and minimum labour costs were perhaps enforced more, then it may be worth a business getting machinery to collect fruit or vegetables. There'd be a higher initial cost, but of course then that cost is becomes more fixed. Then we're going to look at if we're being efficient. There are techniques and language that we use for that. We talk about lean production, and what we mean by lean is we get rid of all the wastage, so we are producing at our highest speed and responsiveness. This leads us to, if we're going to be lean, what we could do is we could produce just in time. What this means is that we don't have vast stacks of raw materials waiting. We only produce as we need it, so we don't have stockpiles of created goods either. We are asked to make a certain amount. We order the goods for this just in time to work. When we order the goods, they have to come at the speed that we need them to. They have to come reliably and fast, and then we can produce just what we need and get rid of it so that we have the cash flow through for the new stocks as we need it. This saves a lot of cash flow problems. And you'll see the benefits and the disadvantages. And then brought in the, I'd suggest, mid-1990s onwards, is Kaizen technique. This has come from Japan, and in this process staff are encouraged to make small constant changes to the way that they work to constantly and continuously improve the efficiency of a business. Before that, it was always considered that managers knew best and that staff on the workforce and on the shop floor wouldn't have any useful input. This gives power and motivation to staff to say improvements that they noticed could be made. Of course, technology is vital to efficiency, and I'll let you read this. That means communication. That means robotics. That means using customer data, perhaps. But of course, there are problems with using technology. I'll let you read that. And of course, we may improve the quality. It can be difficult to improve efficiency, that is speed, and product quality at the same time. So this is where the setting of objectives is important. A business has to have decided which is going to be its focus, which thing it's going to try to tighten up on. And as you can see, quality is reliability. It may be customer service. It may be something that makes it unique. It's important to the brand name and the appearance. So a little bit like the Kaizen, quality has a cycle and recommends this constant loop. You plan, then you make the improvement, then you check, and then you act on that. It's a constant loop. And remember, without good quality, there are not just financial costs, late delivery, or lost customers, but also you may be sending out unsafe products. And there are benefits to high quality. One of the key things is quality control. So it's important that a certain proportion of things are inspected. Often this is done by machinery now. And this makes sure that we catch any errors or any faults in products, particularly, as I say, where unsafe products could result. Quality assurance is important, so that system of checking. When I first had my first proper postgraduate job, I was a programmer, and they brought in TQM, Total Quality Management. And this meant that we would write our code, but before we wrote our code, we would check the specification was correct. Then, after that, we would write our code, and that would be checked. And then finally, we would present our code for inspection, and that would be checked. And the point of TQM is that it's quicker, but more importantly, cheaper to get things right first time. So you check at every stage to make sure that you're not introducing errors, because the later it takes you to find that error, the further back you have to go and repeat the process, and the more expensive that becomes. There are quality standards that we adhere to. I won't read these, but you can read these. And this returns here to the Kaizen. Again, you're making small improvements, and you may be put in teams to make improvements and look for improvements. Now, all of this might be absolutely obvious to you. Clearly, why wouldn't you get staff to make things better? But you have to remember and look back at, firstly, an older way of working, where, as I say, staff were never asked for improvements. They were told what to do, and they were told to do it the way they were told to do it. But you have to remember that a lot of businesses still work like that. So this system is important to remember and to introduce. And finally, you have tools that manage the inventory and the supply chain. The inventory is the stock that you hold. It may be raw materials, it may be the finished good, and it may be that work in progress. The more inventory you have, the more your finances are tied up in goods that have not been sold yet. So how can we, what can we do about managing supply chain? And here's a little extra about the operational performance. Of course, we have the inventory control chart. This is vital that you learn to recognise it and its key elements. You need to know at what point you need to reorder. You need to know because of the lead time, so you need to know how long it takes for an order to come in, how much you will get through in that time. You need to know how much is the most you can store and only order up to that amount. And you need to know what your buffer amount is, so that you can order when and how much you need at the right time. If you don't have the inventory in or the raw materials in, there will be delays, and people will have to be paid while they're not working. You may be able to include extra workers, and it is important to remember times where there will be changes to demand, such as Christmas time, and such as you will probably be aware, this situation we're in right now has made a huge difference, and their calculations have had to change. If you can't keep up, there's always outsourcing, but of course that's more likely to be more costly. so you can get others to do the work for you on a temporary or more permanent basis. And then, of course, you have to manage those supply chains. You have to have, as it says here, relationships between the business and their partners to ensure that you are sure of their reliability. Remember things such as the ethical issues. Who do you choose to supply with? There are a number of reasons why you may choose different suppliers. Maybe on price, maybe on quality, maybe on their flexibility. They may not be the cheapest, but the most flexible. And I'm going to let you read that. Okay, so that is a brief summary for you now to go and read and make notes on these chapters.